Again from Louisville, Kentucky with our newest live stream, Saturday, 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We try to do this every week. Hope we get some people checking in and ask me questions about the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Led Zeppelin. Rolling Stones is the topic this week with Hackney Diamonds being released yesterday. Most stores couldn't keep the CDs in stock. They sold right away, and the albums are selling like crazy too. The In Groove, Mike from the In Groove said people from 25 up were buying the album. He said it was his #1 album of the day that he sold. So the Rolling Stones are doing it again at 80 years old. Pretty amazing. Got this. This came from a collection from my buddy Kevin Records here in Louisville, Kentucky. He bought a collection of classic rock from the early 70s, about 200 albums, and in the middle of it was this pristine 1971 first press of Sticky Fingers with the zipper all the way to the top and the cover never unglued to show the Andy Warhol portrait underneath. It's got the writing on both sides, which first presses had. It's got the usual marks from the shipping box from the zipper that was on top of it. The original inner sleeve. And what most important, said this whole collection was pretty much all near mint or unplayed records. Got this first press, Sticky Fingers, side 1. This is a record club issue from Atlantic Record Club. And it is, looks like it's unplayed. No spindle wear marks and no scuffs or marks on the album at all. I haven't played it yet on my Thorns TD320 turntable, but I'll test play it this week before I put it up for sale.
Brad Poynell says good evening.
Way to go, Brad. My local guy is checking in. But the Better Records that buys audiophile pressings, they're always looking for these first press of Sticky Fingers. So I'll probably send a message to Tom Port about the Sticky Fingers. He likes to buy those in BC-13s from the early 80s or late 70s and the Led Zeppelin 2 RLs. Got another Rolling Stones Holy Grail here. Somebody had 2 of these on the internet last week. They must have been from a jukebox dealer or something from the 60s. The record was taken out right away when brand new. And the sleeve for I Can't Get No Satisfaction has no ring wear, writing, tears, no splits on the edges. Perfect condition. I'll show it real gently. Perfect sleeve from the Stones' biggest song from late 1965. An excellent, hardly played record. I Can't Get No Satisfaction. That changed everything for the Rolling Stones.
Jerry Marchesi. Hey Frank, nothing but the best. Yeah, awesome Stones.
Jerry gave me some good feedback on eBay this week. He's bought a My Sweet Lord George Harrison picture sleeve from me from the United Kingdom. Jerry's one of my good customers. How you doing there, Jerry? You like that picture sleeve there, Jerry? I've never had one, that sleeve in that kind of condition before. That's pretty amazing, I'd say. Yeah, let's get that back in the sleeve. we got Brad and Jerry asking questions. Anybody else that want to ask some questions?
He said, great, thanks, oh yes. Want that.
Well, I'm sure you do. Well, I hate to tell you, it's $399. Talked about the Rolling Stones. I showed this last week, but I've done a little more research on it. And I think only the Keith is original autograph, or just his first name. And Brian Jones was pretty much director of the group in '63. Did all the publicity and did a lot of the interviews and everything. And I think Brian Jones might have done most of these autographs. Show a little close up of that. But that definitely is a Brian Jones autograph there on the back. Does that seem pretty clear?
Yeah.
I got my oldest son. He's the director of the live stream tonight. And there's a big Brian Jones autograph here, but it's hard to see with the dark suits on. But I think Brian did most of the autographs for the other members on this one. 1963 glossy souvenir postcard from Valex that Brian Jones mostly autographed. Haven't put that up for sale yet because I do a lot of research on it.
Brad Parnell says, do you think Brian Jones's death was an accident?
Accident? Yes. One of the gardener or the chauffeur, one of those two killed him that night. And all his clothes were in possessions, high-end stuff was pretty much gone the next morning. He was drowned by somebody. He was a swimmer in high school. How do you die in a swimming pool drowning when you were a real good swimmer in high school? Doesn't make sense to me. He upsets the wrong person, I guess. Then he was under hallucination from drugs and couldn't resist when somebody tried to drown him. It must have been pretty easy to hold him under. This just came in this week. We talked about the Beatles a little bit. Beatles memorabilia item. There's a lot of reproductions from the early 70s, but this is original. You can tell by the SPP it has there on the bottom, which stands for Standard Plastic Products. They had the license to make items like this in 1964. They made like a lot of different things, billfolds, and made about 10 different items, Beatles memorabilia items. So this is got a working zipper on it. Cleaned up pretty good. Just couldn't get that $1.25 pink price that's on the back off of it, but that kind of dates it. That's how much it was in 1964 at a Woolworths or something. Pretty nice.
Jerry said all those Beatles magazines are in great, amazing condition.
Oh yeah, I sent him 5. Thanks. Bought that from a collector. It had a big Beatles memorabilia collection. It had the Christmas record and all the magazines, and had the 2 programs, 1965 and 66, from the special programs when the Beatles played in Chicago. But I bought it from them, and they didn't ship it for 6 days, and then and they wouldn't respond to my questions, so I started a case, and eBay put pressure on them and got mailed out the next day. I got it like 2 days later, but I didn't think I was going to get it. I got it a little too cheap, but it was a big Beatles collection. But I'm not going to tell all my secrets of when I buy and sell.
He said, sweet.
I'm working on another big deal on a estate sale right now. All right, let's talk about Sgt. Pepper. You know, I sold the Nimbus Supercut a few weeks ago to a gentleman in California. And I have this Holy Grail, another of this, a 1968 UK mono pressing, and looking like never played or played once at the most on audiophile equipment, maybe to record professionally to a reel-to-reel tape. But when the gentleman seller sold this to me, he just talked about the error on one side, but he didn't talk about the most important error on the B side. So on the A side, there's an extra period, sold in period U period K period, right there below parlophone. That's a rare error there. But this is the big deal error on B side. There is no day in the life listed on the label. No spindle wear on that. And the same gentleman who bought my Nimbus Supercut bought this today. It's going out in the mail beginning of next week. John, it'll be on your way. But it has unbanded tracks, and Day in the Life is there at the last song, but they kind of buried that the song was on there because the BBC, going to the story of why the BBC banned Day in the Life. So this is the signed May 5th, May 5th of 1967, Paul McCartney signed this Please Pay a Doctor Bill. This was after Sgt. Pepper was done, but it wasn't released yet. And there's the COA from Frank Casio. So a week later, about 10 days later, the BBC got a preview copy of this album. And they threw a fit when they listened to A Day in the Life, because I Love to Turn You On, and went upstairs and had a smoke. And they banned the BBC from playing A Day in the Life. So they had so many first pressings already made with A Day in the Life on the label. But when they ran out of those, they didn't put The Day in the Life on the B side there on the bottom, just to please the BBC. So that was the second pressing. That's the first time I've ever had one of those. I only had it for a little more than 24 hours before it sold. That's pretty unique, pretty rare. And this laminated cover also from the United Kingdom is almost impossible because they were made on this thin laminated card. But this looks beautiful with the only crease would be this lift here on that bottom corner. Creaks when you open it up. Got the original dark green inner sleeve. Got the flips on the top, which makes it original. Got mono up here. Parlophone mono, long play. And printed and made by Garland and Lofthouse Limited. That is the sharpest original cover I've ever had in my lifetime. I didn't have it very long. Any questions about that Holy Grail Sgt. Pepper? I told the gentleman in California, I said, next to your Nimbus Supercut, sealed Nimbus Supercut, and this pressing with no Day in the Life, I think it would be pretty amazing to have that autograph framed right in between them. But it hasn't sold yet. Price on this autograph is a firm $2,200. Right before, Paul signed this right before the classic rock album that came out that changed everything in rock music after that. You couldn't go anywhere in the summer of 1967 without hearing this album being played on the radio or in a neighborhood out of somebody's window. Just sticking on Beatles for a second before I get into Led Zeppelin. Got this in today. This is a different BC13. Lifts right off the top. This is the Australian version of it from 1978. See, all the albums are printed on the back. Got a little bit of wear to the bottom down there. This is only the second time I've had this Australian box set. One thing about this, they always say you can't judge it. Judge an album by the cover. Well, this is a good example of that. This is kind of made on cheap card, but it has audiophile pressings in most every album. And some of them were even cut with the mastering engineer of Don Bartley, and he's the one that cut the Audio 5 Sgt. Pepper in 1983. So a lot of that Andrew from Polygram Auctions says is the best sounding stereo pressing ever that exists, right up there with the Nimbus Supercut. He said it's kind of hard that they're both terrific pressings. Kind of go through this. Got a Please Please Me with a -2 cut. I haven't tested these out, but I'm hoping it's a German plates of the audiophiles. Best pressing, same pressing as the Beatles. Best way to hear Please Please Me in stereo that exists. You got a With the Beatles with a different type of cover than the UK. It has a -3, -4 Don Bartley cut. So that ought to be an audiophile pressing. Got a Hard Day's Night. All these records are in the original plastic bag, and they all have no spindle wear and look like they've never been played. The gentleman the seller that sold this to me didn't even know this was an Australian box set, but I knew it was by these two covers here. They're unique. Got a Beatles for Sale, another Don Bartley. I was in a local record store, Better Days, here in Louisville, Kentucky, and they had a used copy of this playing it as a test for just customers to see if they liked it or not in the store. And I had never heard Beatles for Sale quite like that before, and I said, "No, how much is that?" And he said, "Oh, it's $35. I said, "Oh, I gotta have that." That's how I really got my first unique experience with Beatles for Sale before I discovered the -1 UK cut. But the Beatles for Sale is a -3, -5 Don Bartley cut on this one. You got to help with the -2, -3. Haven't figured who OR is in Australia, mastering engineer. You got a rubber sole with a darker cover than the UK. Looks a little unique. It has a -1, -6 in the dead wax. You got a revolver, -2, -2. You got the Sgt. Pepper. Now this says BR. Yeah, that's not Don Bartley. I was hoping to be the Don Bartley like the Audio 5, but it's not. It's a -2, -2, but look how that cover compared to the UK cover. There's just no comparison. This looks like a washed out copy of this. Look how vibrant that is compared to this. Amazing how different countries, they couldn't quite get it down like the United Kingdom did. You got a white album with -2, Don Bartley on both albums, mastered this one. So I'm hoping this one really sounds good. A Yellow Submarine, -2. Here's the Abbey Road, another Don Bartley. -4, -3 is an audiophile pressing from the United Kingdom. They might use the same plates, but it said Don Bartley mastered, engineered this, and he knew some tricks to make the Beatles records sound even better using the master tapes. There's always been a rumor on this UK copy with stereo on the top that this little red thing here, kind of red tinnish, is a blood stain and is a clue that Paul was dead. I can't quite see it, but there's always been that rumor of the blood stain on the Australian cover. The Abbey Road, same as my shirt. What a masterpiece to go out on when you're only 24, 25 years old and kings of the pop world. You're forever preserved in time on this album at that age, when you break up at that age. You gotta Let It Be. It's got a 3U, which is supposed to be a audiophile cut from the United Kingdom, improved on the 2U. Notice how the top's a little different. And you got the rarities. That's pretty nice. Put that together. Any questions out there?
Earlier when you were talking about the Sgt. Pepper, Brad said, I don't remember hearing Sgt. Pepper the summer of 1967, but I was only 1.5 years old.
Yeah, well, you probably heard it and just didn't realize it. Can't remember it. I was 13 at the time. I definitely heard it. Talk about Led Zeppelin for a second. Drink a swig of water. One more Beatles memorabilia item. Got these new arrival of Soakies in this week with hardly any wear to the faces or the hands. Real tough to get them in this condition. It's got Colgate Palmolive on the bottom. Was made in a plant about 10 miles from me, right across the river, in the old Colgate Palmolive plant. And there's still this rumor in Louisville that there's a couple people that have a whole closet full of Soakies when they worked for Colgate Palmolive, still in the original boxes. I've never, I wish I could get a hold of one of them. They had a whole bunch of Ringo and Paul in the boxes, I'd buy them all. Most important thing when you buy these used, make sure that the head's not cracked on that edge, on that rim, and the cap still screws on the top. You never want to buy these with the original liquid in there, the soap liquid, because it's turned to acid, and if it leaks out, it will take the paint all the way down off the bottom of the front of it. Because I did that once when I moved to Louisville 27 years ago. When I got here in Louisville, I had a lot of that paint all missing from Ringo because I had the original liquid inside. So anytime I buy these now, I say, please empty it completely, dry it out. Ringo's the same way. That's how you want to find them. 1965, made in Louisville, Kentucky, where I'm at. Been here for 27 years. Led Zeppelin now. We're to Led Zeppelin. Got this in yesterday. It's a sealed 2005 pressing of Houses of the Holy from Classic Records, 200 gram. These were cut from the original 3-track master tapes that Jimmy Page loaned to Classic Records when they cut all the Led Zeppelin albums in 2005.
Brad said he's been living there for 58 years.
58, way to go, Brad. So if he was 1 in 67, 66, he's 12 years younger than me. He must have been born there. So these Classic Records were sealed in like a loose shrink wrap baggie, so that over the years the cover never gets any damage from the loose like baggy shrink they have on it. And it's got an OBI like they do in Japan. And this is supposed to be a real audiophile pressing of Houses of the Holy. But I'm not going to open it. I'm selling it sealed the way it is.
Yeah, Brad said that's correct. He was born here.
Good guess. Another Led Zeppelin item. Well, I think I showed this before. This is the hardback book when you went to see the Led Zeppelin in 1969 in the United States, their first tour. About halfway through the tour, they became the headlining band. They were the opening band the first few months of January. Can you imagine going to a rock show and Led Zeppelin was the opening band? That wouldn't be very good for the main band, I'd say. People just say, we saw the best, let's leave. Look at that psychedelic back, the hard back. This was a souvenir you bought at the merch table, the Led Zeppelin show. A young Led Zeppelin, and you notice at the beginning, who was the mastermind of this group? He was right in the middle, Jimmy Page. He kind of helped Robert Plant get his vocal abilities and his stage presence and everything, get it together before they broke wide open with Led Zeppelin 2 and Led Zeppelin Zosa and Stairway to Heaven.
Brad's talking about with the opening act. He said it didn't work too well when Hendrix opened for the Monkees.
No. I have sold the tickets for that Monkey show 3 times. It was in Forest Hills in New York. And the Jimi Hendrix opened up for the Monkees. That was Mickey Dolenz idea. Because he knew at Monterey Pop how big Hendrix went over, and so he said, "Oh, come on, Hendrix, you guys can open up for us. That'd be great. Great double bill." But it wasn't, because when Hendrix was out there, all they said is, "We want Davey, we want Davey." The third night, Hendrix had it. He's playing his guitar, doing all his fancy stuff, and the little screaming girls had no part of it. So he just gave the finger and walked off stage. That was it. But I've sold that ticket stub that has to say the Monkees Forest Hills on it. Usually they cut it and where you only got a little stub and it didn't say the Monkees, but I had one that was almost complete and I sold it for $500 with the program. Led Zeppelin. I showed those cassettes last week. Showed that box set. This is a Led Zeppelin jukebox. I've shown this before, but I think it's pretty nice. I have 2 of these in inventory. Led Zeppelin 1971 jukebox, 7-inch. A Led Zeppelin Zosa. It's got Rock and Roll and Black Dog on the A side, and the complete version of Stairway to Heaven on side 2. It's got the jukebox strips in it. I sold an Exile jukebox a few weeks ago and a House of the Holy jukebox. They were both pretty rare. I think I told you, no, maybe I didn't tell you. My Exile on Main Street reel 7.5, the most expensive reel tape, factory reel tape of any rock act. I sold for $1,222 at the beginning of last week. That's the third time I've had that reel, and I've sold it for the same price each time. So that's how rare that factory 7.5 inches per second. How much people want that reel-to-reel to have a real expensive reel-to-reel player, because it's a great way, amazing way to hear Exile on Main Street, which is a fantastic album by the Rolling Stones. That's original Unipack cover in really good shape. Has all the postcards and near mint with the Artesian logo on the records. It's the only way you can hear Exile on, because the master tapes were mixed in LA when the Mick and the Keith were hanging out there in LA, and I don't know if the master tapes even exist anymore, but that's the true way to hear Exile in its full glory. It's got all 12 postcards still attached inside. I'm not going to open it all up. All of that's pretty fragile. This Unipack cover didn't last very long because it's real fragile too. It says right there, it says Unipack patent number, printed in the USA. A lot of people kept bringing them back because when they pulled out these sleeves, they were tearing it up, and they said they were trying to get their money back, and so the record stores told Atlantic Records about this problem, and so they turned it into a gatefold cover. Only lasts about 6 months, this original Unipack cover. Any questions about that, or Rolling Stones, or Led Zeppelin before I move along? Talk about this sealed CD for a second. This is a late, like 1987 sealed compact disc of Abbey Road, and the original long box was sold at Turtle's, the music and more store that saves you money. The original long box in perfect shape. The rumor on the street is there's going to be a comeback in compact disc, and people are buying them up for $1 or $2 cheap because they think the price is going to go up. But I'm still a vinyl man, but we'll see. Compact disc never does it for me, like playing a audiophile pressing of the Beatles, Stones, and Led Zeppelin on my Thorns TD 320 turntable from the early 70s. Also, I got a Yamaha tube receiver also, so my equipment is from the late 70s, but I like it. Talk about the butcher cover again for a second. We a half hour in?
Yeah, 34.
Butcher cover and introducing the Beatles at that. I've shown this butcher cover before that I did about a month ago. And this is the one I did about 5 days ago. It's steam peeled at East Coast, Scranton, number 3. There's a few small restored touch-ups right there above George's head. One right there, a few on these edges, but I'm real careful when I get to their faces, their bodies, and that baby's head there. I'm getting it off really nice. I'm pretty good at it.
Daniel Castillo said, did Mofo Gate prove analog is a gimmick?
Did they prove it's a gimmick? I don't think so. They proved that they got caught DSD, and it wasn't all analog. That's why a lot of Chad Cassim in Analog Productions, he tries to do everything all cut analog the whole way when he's doing his pressings if it's possible. There's a few things from the 90s and stuff that never did exist in a true analog master tape. That's the trunk cover that came off. A few tears there, get it off. There's only a couple times I've ever been able to get that trunk cover off in one piece. You just never know how it's been stored and how that glue, what it's done to the glue over 55 years.
Daniel says Michael Fremer could tell analog digital apart. He could tell the difference.
Yeah, he can. Even when the MoFi was all happening, that's why they didn't invite Michael Fremer to the MoFi factory where they cut the albums, because they thought that would be, Michael Fremer would probably ask the wrong questions. They had Mike from the In-Groove go from Phoenix instead. But he was a pretty good interviewer. But Michael Fremer, he is the first person that stuck with vinyl records when nobody else, when everybody was trading their vinyl records in for CD, he still believed in the analog vinyl pressings. And he'll go through his whole life talking about how those late 70s, early 70s pressings, Sticky Fingers from Germany and the United Kingdom, and the BC-13, he knows it all. What is the best audiophile pressing of all the main rock groups? He says the Abbey Road, the first cut from the United Kingdom, number -2, -1, is the best pressing ever, but I disagree a little bit. I think that 1973 France contract cut was a little more dynamic. They did something to the vocals and the mid-range, and they just brought it out. They might have widened the stereo soundscape a little bit on it too. Those in France and Germany, they had these mastering engineers and the equipment that probably doesn't exist anymore, and they knew exactly what to do if they had the master tapes, the analog master tapes, and they got them loaned from Abbey Road. They actually used the master tapes, where that'd be impossible now to get those out of Abbey Road in London. But in the early 70s, they would loan them out. Talked about the Ad Back again. My Pride and Joy, Holy Grail, Beatles album. It's about the 5th time I've had an ad back, but I've never had one this kind of condition before. With that glossy slick with no rub wear. Usually you always have rub wear here on the bottom. You can just see a touch of it right there at the bottom of Paul's shoulder. Usually it's all the way across. It's important to have that printed in the USA. That is only on the very first 6,000 slicks that were made for introducing the Beatles in Chicago in the summer of 1963, and sat in a storage unit for 6 months. As VJ said, "Oh, the Beatles will never sell in America. We'll just hold on to those if we ever need them." Then when I Want to Hold Your Hand was going to #1, they had a board meeting and they said, "We got to put this out now. We don't want anybody to know that P.S. I Love You and Love Me Do is on there, so we'll put these ads on the back to disguise it." Look how sharp and glossy that is. Usually, these weren't shrink wrap, so they'd usually be writing from the record store what the price was, so people would know, but this one has no writing at all. And 4 sharp corners and all the printing on the spine. There aren't two, there can't be more 10 ad backs in the world that exist in that condition. Any questions about the ad back? I showed that last week. Gotta be real down with that. It's got the first pressing of with P.S. I Love You as the first song, and it's got Love Me Do on. Love Me Do is the last song. Excellent, hardly played condition. First pressing of mono of introducing the Beatles. There we go. People kind of make fun of me with my gloves, but when you're touching a $3,000 album cover, I think you need to be extra careful. It's a museum piece. I don't know if I've ever shown these. These are from the Gordon Beyer. He was the original photographer when the Beatles played at Crosley Field in 1966 in Cincinnati. They got rained out the first day, so they played a noon concert the next day. And you can see Lennon, you can see him underneath the tarp, so they didn't get electrocuted. See Paul and George, John, Ringo in the back. Only about 12,000 people showed up at the Crosley Field that day because it was rained out the day before, and a lot of people couldn't go on Sunday at noon because of church, going to church. And they played St. Louis that same evening, August 21st, 1966. These are from the original negatives. And I have these, I can't show them now, they're on the wall there.
Oh, hell, move it.
They colored photos from the same negatives, same photographer. Paul doing his ooze on one of his songs, and Paul and John at the same microphone with their pinstripe suits on and their paisley shirts on from, that was a fashion in summer of 1966. One thing that's going on about the, there's video of Paul playing She's a Woman from Australia a couple days ago. And I hate to be critical, but I think his voice doesn't sound too good, but I know people want to go see him because he's a legend. But there's something about, I mean, would you go see Tiger Woods play golf at 81? Would you go see Michael Jordan play basketball at 81? Maybe it's different, but hearing Paul sing at 81 compared to Wings Over America when he was 34, 35, or Abbey Road when he was 25, big difference. Those when the Beatles were hot and then 64, 65, there's nothing like the way they harmonized, the way they sang, the way they produced their music. And Paul was, even if you listen to the outtakes on Anthology of I Want to Hold Your Hand, Paul's pushing Ringo to play that real fast there at the beginning. And Ringo didn't want to do it. He said, no, it's got to kick right away. So Paul was pretty much the producer from I Want to Hold Your Hand. He started early.
Brad wants to know, do you have any copies of the 1964 Eyes of Storm by Paul?
I have a sealed, the special edition that 175 was sent out from England. in the hardback book, but it's factory sealed and it's got Paul's autograph inside it. Brad, if you want it, it's on sale for $10,000.
Then Daniel asked thoughts on Lou Reed saying the Beatles were overrated.
Well, Lou Reed's no longer with us, but how can you say the Beatles were overrated when they sold 400 million copies and they still have #1 albums 50 years after the fact? Kind of tough to say that they were overrated. That's my opinion, but I know that's what Lou Reed's.
Zoso Abel carries some excellent stuff.
A new person there?
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then we talked about Paul from a couple of days ago in Australia. Let's talk about Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones at that club 2 nights ago in New York. 600 people were there. Daniel Craig, a lot of celebrities were there. And I like the Hackney Diamonds new album. I don't have it yet, but I like the 3 songs that have been streamed. The Angry, I love that song. I had the 10-inch box set that I sold that had the 10-inch record, and I love the Sweet Sounds of Thunder. So Sweet Sounds of Heaven, and then they just put out the Bite My Head Off with Paul playing the fuzz. The producer Andrew Watt gave him a special Vox, not Vox. What's the bass guitar he plays that they're looking for? I'm not coming up with it right now. Maybe somebody in the chat can tell me the name of the bass guitar that he originally had. Hofner bass, and Andrew Watts gave him a special Hofner bass, but there was a little something extra, and it had a little button you pushed, and it turned into a big fuzz with a fuzzed sound bass, and that's what you hear in the middle of that song when he cranks it up. But going back to that, I think that there is a little trickery on this new Rolling Stones album because they couldn't quite produce that when they performed live. I know it was a small club, but they didn't sound anything like the song when they performed it there that night. And then when they had Lady Gaga came out and sang with Mick Jagger, she kind of a little bit put him to shame. It's kind of tough putting somebody with at their peak and their voice and everything against an 80-year-old man. So kind of felt sorry for Mick there, but he set himself up. But in the studio, maybe you can get away with it, but in a live setting, you can't. Lady Gaga put him to shame.
Daniel says Mick Jagger said the Beatles were a studio band. They couldn't move a crowd the way Stones or Elvis did.
I see his point, but I don't know. If you watch those Beatle concerts from Australia from '64, you watch the Shea Stadium from '65, they move the audience. Just the chemistry, just seeing the Beatles there in concert. And even the last show in '66 at Candlestick Park, if you go to YouTube and play that Day Tripper, it's like one of the first punk heavy metal songs of all time. I mean, Paul he knows it's his last show, and he gives it his all on every song. His background vocals, even on If I Needed Someone by George Harrison, he just carries the song. And the Beatles, they were just terrific performers.
Brad said they moved crowds in Hamburg.
Yeah, they moved in about Hamburg 1962, 61, 62, where they did their 10,000 hours of practice. We've heard the late 70s Hamburg 2-album set, which is not that good, but Peter Jackson is working on it because he knows how to make that old like the Let It Be, the Get Back documentary. He knows how to separate those guitars, the voices, and everything, and make it sound a whole new way. So if he comes out with the Hamburg tapes and professional like that Get Back documentary, it's going to shock everybody because John Lennon always said you haven't heard the Beatles live until you heard them in Hamburg. They were terrific.
You say that they are cleaning up It's coming up.
The Hamburg tapes.
The club records.
Yeah, the Hamburg Club. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're cleaning up. Peter Jackson's been working on it for over 6 months. And I think since the Rolling Stones came out with their album and it's going to be in the top 5 or whatever, because they say it's selling, the stores can't keep it in stock or they're not producing it fast enough. I think that there will be news in the next week about the Beatles Now and Then release of the single and the red and blue remixed and expanded editions. But I could be wrong, but I think that you're going to have a Beatles and Stones competing for each other here this Christmas season. But maybe it's going to get delayed to 2024. Only time will tell. Even Ringo says, I don't know. I said I was supposed to be released by now. So even Ringo's not sure.
Yeah, Brad said he has both volumes of the Star Club records on vinyl.
Yeah.
And then Daniel says, do you think the Beatles would outdo Jimi Hendrix if they played Woodstock?
Would they outdo Hendrix?
Yeah, in Woodstock.
Hendrix was on when people were leaving. They were tired of the mud the last day. I think the Beatles would have outdone Jimi Hendrix. That's my opinion. But I'm a little biased. I think the Beatles are the greatest rock performers of all time. If they came back from Hamburg, they were on fire. They couldn't even really capture in the studio how good they were. 64, 65, 66, and then they were at their peak there with Sgt. Pepper. And then it was a little bit over the peak then. The fighting started sneaking in, and they didn't like Paul directing everything. Magical Mystery Tour would never happen without Paul. The Abbey Road was definitely would have never happened without Paul saying, come on guys, let's do one more, let's do it right. It'd be our swan song.
Caesar J says, hello Mr. Stickermania and son. And then So says, the Beatles live era, the crowds were so loud they couldn't hear themselves play all the time, play most of the time, with some notable exceptions.
Yeah.
You had to mention some of Elvis and Stones of the same era.
Yeah, the Sweden concert is terrific of the Beatles in '63 before the hysteria started sneaking in. And they're really a tight band, and just even seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan '64 with 725 in the audience, the Beatles were on fire through all their songs. What a showman. McCartney and Lennon, Harrison, Ringo, they all were at that time. What was the question about that? Notable exceptions, yeah, like the Shea Stadium. They knew that there were 16 cameras that night, and they knew they had to give a heck of a show. Their shows were only a half hour. They packed them in there for a half hour. They put all their energy half hour and then boom, into their limo or tank or whatever, or ambulance, and out before the crowd knew what happened. Didn't talk about the Christmas album. I don't think I've shown that in the video yet.
No, you haven't.
Got the White Album. This is the original Christmas album from 1970 that you got by belonging to the Beatles fan club in America. 1970, it had all 7 of their Christmas greetings on one album. How you can tell it's original, you have to be able to see Ringo's eyeballs in that bottom picture. And you have to be able to see Theatre Royal above John Lennon on that wall. And then on the record, you buy a Christmas album record and it doesn't have a small indentation on the record label, and then you have a counterfeit. If it has a big long indentation like that, you don't have original. This is original. It's got bell sound and the Winchester rifle in the dead wax. It's in very good plus condition. The cover's got a little bit of edge wear, but it's the real deal. It's up for sale on my STICKERMANIA 2853 store for $300. Talk about this White Album. Audiophile pressing of the White Album from 1981.
Was this an official Apple release?
It wasn't an Apple release official. This is authentic, but it was only, you got this free by belonging to the fan club. It was never in a record store. You had to belong to the Beatles fan club in 1969, 1970, and they sent you this a couple months before Christmas. Never in the record store. It says not for sale right there on the bottom of the cover. That's why it's pretty rare. Back to this White Album. 1981, United Kingdom, they made a pressing, audiophile pressing of the White Album. And it's mono with the photos on the poster. And it's got -1, -1 on all four sides, a matrix. I have to check the second one. I know it's -1, -1 on record one. -2 on side 4. And -4 on side 3. But this is more of an audiophile pressing than the original 1968 mono pressings, because the lays and the vinyl, they knew how to make them a better quality there in the late 70s or early 80s, where you didn't have that run-off groove wear towards the end that you got really easy on the original pressings, because there's so much grooves on the White Album. It's a tough one to make an audiophile pressing of, but this will sound much better than the original 1968 pressing. They didn't have the equipment to produce that in 68, where they did in 81. But it's made from the same master tube cut master tapes at Abbey Road Studios in London. This is a recent release that I don't think I've shown. It's a sealed. It's the only way that you can get the Blu-ray mix of the White Album from 2018 is to have the CD box set. So if you really want to hear the White Album in 5.1 sound Blu-ray, you have to have this CD box set. They've never released it to streaming, and it wasn't on the album box set, vinyl box set, only the CD. I've never really been into these new mixes. I guess I like the original mixes. It's forever embedded in my mind, the original Beatle mixes from the 60s. The Abbey Road 70s, early 70s pressings sound to me so much better than the reimagined 50th anniversary by Giles Martin. Any other questions before we wrap this up tonight? I'm glad you guys all checked in with us. Are we close to an hour?
Yeah, we're 11:59.
Right. I think I talked about all my new things, but I'm working on a big deal. I'll try to get it here in the next week or two, and it'll amaze you. That's this estate auction I'm working on. And I think that's it from Louisville, Kentucky. We made it one more time. Check in with us next Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank for all of you who ask questions and everything.
Chris W., you can never beat out the original in almost everything. He never beat out the original in almost everything.
The original mixes were freshly cut from the master tapes, and there's no way 50 years after the fact that those master tapes are going to sound as good as when they were freshly recorded. That's what I think. So long from Louisville, Kentucky. See you later.